The movie opens by showing the Empire's elite troops led by a war general named Sushin carrying out a mission to rescue the Emperor who was kidnapped by a rebel group. The mission went smoothly according to plan, thanks to Sushin's expertise in coordinating all his troops. As a form of gratitude for Sushin's services that had saved him, the Emperor intended to appoint Sushin as governor. But because the task was considered too heavy, and also because Sushin did not really like politics, he immediately refused on the grounds that he wanted to live freely as a commoner. After finishing meeting the Emperor, Sushin then met his brother-in-law named Yuan. He is very similar to Sushin because he is known to be very good at martial arts, even though he is quite temperamental. Instead of accepting the post of governor, which is respected by many people, Sushin gave Yuan the opportunity. Besides feeling that Yuan is more suitable for the position, Sushin also has noble intentions to live simply with his wife named Ying by establishing a wushu martial arts college so that it can benefit many people. 5 years after retiring from the military, Sushin is now living happily with Ying and their little son named Feng. According to the original plan of establishing a wushu martial arts college, the plan was finally realized with Sushin's biological father who directly intervened to lead the college. Just when Sushin was accepting many new students at his hermitage, Yuan came to the house to meet his sister and nephew, including Sushin's father Suan, who had looked surprised but finally felt happy. Now Yuan has served as a governor with a very different appearance from 5 years ago. At that moment, Suan apologized again for the death of Yuan's father, who was killed by himself, and hoped that Yuan could forget the past. In the past, Suan and Yuan's father came from the same college, but because Yuan's father learned a forbidden move called Five Poison Fist, he turned into an evil and cruel person until Suan was forced to finish his life to end the cruelty. And instead of learning from his own father's tragic experience, Yuan actually claimed that he had succeeded in perfecting the 5 poisons. It turns out that all this time, Yuan still holds a deep grudge for what Suan did to his late biological father. After Yuan killed Suan, Yuan's men immediately dragged Ying and her son, who tried to escape, but Yuan suddenly slashed the hand of one of his men for daring to touch his favorite sister. Soon, Sushin finally arrived home and found all his siblings dead, including his much-loved father. Suddenly, 2 twin warriors sent by Yuan immediately attacked him until an epic battle ensued. The 2 swordsmen immediately fled after failing to defeat Sushin, while Yuan was seen on the banks of a rushing river to scatter the ashes of his late biological father as a form of final respect. Soon the 2 warriors came to report that they had not managed to kill Sushin, and soon Sushin also came there. Realizing that all his men would not be able to defeat Sushin, Yuan decided to step in and challenge Sushin to a duel, and they engaged in a high-level martial arts battle. It turned out that Yuan had sewn a layer of black gold on his body that made him invulnerable to sharp weapons. But for Sushin, a person who had reached a high level of martial arts, it was not difficult for him to launch an attack even with his bare hands. Yuan then took out the 5 poison fist, which is very forbidden in the martial world. Anyone who is hit by the attack or the slightest touch of the user's hand, the victim's body will immediately be poisoned by a very deadly poison. When Yuan was about to finish Sushin, Feng immediately came forward to protect his father and finally made Yuan stop his attack instantly. But even so, Yuan still intended to finish Sushin by throwing him into the river. Seeing her husband in a very dangerous situation, Ying immediately jumped in after him so that they both drowned and disappeared. Sushan and Ying managed to survive after getting stuck on a log on the edge, and after trying to find help, they finally met a mountain woman. The woman was named Yu, a healer and survivor, who had long lived in seclusion from the martial world. With her acupuncture techniques, Yu began to treat Suchin using her signature needles. She even managed to remove half of the deadly poison that had spread in Suchin's body. For 3 years, Suchin and Ying lived together in the mountains while waiting for Suchin's condition to recover. During that time, their son was also well taken care of by Yuan, and because they knew Yuan would not be evil to Feng, they were not too worried about the state of their only son. During those 3 years, Suchan also continued to train his physique so that he could return to his best condition, and all that he did was none other than to take back his son from Yuan's hands. Meanwhile, in another place, you can see Yuan, who is still honing his 5-poison fist. It turns out that the source of the poison in the deadly move comes from various venomous animals such as scorpions and spiders. In his training, he does not use inanimate objects or experimental animals, but real humans, namely his own men, as a test of the power of the poison in his deadly move. And how heartless Yuan was when he locked Feng up so he couldn't escape. His intentions were actually noble. He just wanted to protect the only family he had. But the method he took was clearly wrong, which actually brought suffering to Feng. One day when Suchin was practicing very hard, he accidentally met 2 powerful warriors who mastered the method of lightening the body. Intrigued, Suchin immediately chased after the 2 of them, but suddenly, whether it was just a hallucination or real, Suchin suddenly found himself in a place where he was challenged to a fight against a wushu god in order to boost his confidence. When Suchin returned home, he was already battered, and he told Ying about his encounter with 2 magic warriors in a strange place. Ying believed him after seeing his body covered in wounds. In the evening, Yu came for a routine visit to check on Sushan's condition. As a physician with decades of experience, she knew very well that Sushan's physical and mental condition was not okay, but Sushan still insisted on believing that he was very healthy. He even told the 2 women about the encounter with the 2 magic warriors on the mountain earlier. After Sushan went into the room, Yu talked one-on-one with Ying to explain Sushan's mental condition, which might have been very severe. In addition to his irregular heartbeat, Yu also said that there was no one in this mountain but the 3 of them, and it was certain that what Sushan said before was nothing more than an illusion in his head. The next day, Suchin returned to the mountain yesterday with the intention of continuing his training with the wushu god, and after a long time of training, Suchin's abilities slowly began to show improvement. Remembering Yu's words, Ying was determined to follow her husband to the place where he used to train, and sure enough, Ying finally realized that her husband was really crazy. The reason why his body is always battered every time he comes home is not because he trains with the wushu god, but because he trains alone and injures his own body. When Suchin comes home, Ying immediately tells him the psychological and mental conditions he is experiencing, but Suchin does not believe his wife's words and remains convinced that all the events he experienced are something completely real. The next day, Suchan returned to training with the wushu god, who actually only existed in his own mind. It is important to note that Sushan's current illusions are not the result of stress or depression, but rather arise from his subconscious as a form of encouragement to revive his high self-confidence. But for Ying, she could only remain speechless after actually realizing her husband's deteriorating mental state. Instead of pinning high hopes on Suchin to save their son, Ying became pessimistic about the possibility of their family being reunited. So rather than continue to rely on her increasingly insane husband, Ying decides to go to the city by herself to get their son back from her brother's hands. Sushan himself seemed to continue to train with the Wushu god, and after repeated defeats, he finally managed to win the fight with one blow that made the Wushu god bounce, and finally he passed mastering all his moves. Now Sushan will face his second opponent, the drunken god, and Suchin's fight resumes. And yes, after seeing his punch through the drunk god's body, Suchin finally began to believe in his wife's words about all this turning out to be just an illusion. Not wanting to continue to be trapped in his own mind and make his wife even more disappointed, Suchin immediately stopped his illusion and decided to return to real life. But it was too late for Suchin to realize his wife's request because Ying had already left and only left a message saying she would save their son alone. In short, Ying arrived at the residence of her own biological brother, and she was crying with emotion after finally being able to meet her son after 3 years of separation. But that happiness ended immediately when her brother appeared and hugged them both. Then with a sharp piece of wood she brought from the forest, Ying intended to kill her own brother, but suddenly... And yes, they were surprised by the appearance of Suchin, who came after his wife from behind. Although his training has been considered crazy and absurd, the moves he managed to master were not something arbitrary. Even the two twin warriors he was able to defeat very easily. Realizing that Suchen would not stop just like that, Yuan immediately ordered his men to take Ying away into the forest. There, they buried Ying alive in a box with a location point that no one knew. Yuan deliberately did all that to make Suchen live in suffering. Rather than letting Suchen be happy with his sister, Yuan preferred that Ying die and Suchen could never again reunite with his family. After finishing burying Ying, the two guards returned to the palace to report on the task they had carried out, but Yuan again showed his cruelty by killing his own two men to ensure that no one knew the location where Ying was buried. After defeating the twin warriors, it was time for Suchen to face off against Yuan, and an epic battle ensued. Taking place in the basement, Suchen's fighting style looked very different compared to 3 years ago. Although Yuan could not be harmed, but with his strength and speed, Suchen managed to outperform the fight. It was proven when Suchen was able to slam Yuan many times without putting up a fight. Still wearing a black gold layer sewn directly onto his body, Yuan began to lead the course of the fight by moving the location of their fight to a very narrow place. After coming out of the well, Suchen managed to turn the situation around by increasing the speed of his hand attacks. He was even able to tear off some of the black gold coating that was tightly attached to Yuan's body. Unable to let things continue like this, Suchen finally used an iron chain to protect both hands from the 5 poison fist attack. When Suchen was about to finish off Yuan, Feng tried to prevent his father from doing so, but because of the anger that had overcome him, Suchen still killed Yuan until he finally died on the spot. Only Yuan is the only person who knows where Ying is buried, and now Yuan is already dead, and of course Suchen is increasingly difficult to find the place where his wife is buried. When he was about to come out, one of the men who participated in burying Ying had told him the name of the forest where Ying was buried, but he died before he could mention the location. Eventually they found the grave, but it was too late because while Suchen and his son were still digging, Ying had already died from oxygen depletion. Regret is now a shadow that will haunt Suchen for the rest of his life, and there is nothing he can do to change that fact. 1 year later, just as the West began to enter China and bring a new culture, Suchin was homeless with his son and became a drunkard due to the stress of losing his beloved wife. Even when his son used the last of his money to buy food for the two of them, Suchin, who was always in a drunken state, ate all the food without leaving anything for his son. When there is a commotion at a stall, then we are introduced to a respected government figure named Colonel Ma. He is also the chairman of the Chinese Wushu Federation, who loves his country's martial arts heritage. He even got into a heated debate with a Westerner who constantly mocked Wushu martial arts because he always lost matches in the arena. Colonel Ma accidentally saw Feng and his father, who looked hungry on the side of the road, and with a sincere heart, Colonel Ma gave them some money, hoping that it would be enough to fill the stomach of the two who looked very hungry. But instead of using the money to buy food for his son, Suchin went to a bar to buy liquor. And because he was only half conscious, Suchin mistakenly took someone else's barrel of drink, and suddenly, when the commotion occurred, Sushan's subconscious reactivated and brought up the figure of the Wushu god in a different appearance. This time he was present as a drunken god and had time to teach Sushan some special moves. Shortly after Sushan mastered the drunken god's moves, the shop owner immediately called Colonel Ma to clean up the mess that happened there. And how surprised Colonel Ma was when he realized that the drunk beggar he saw was the general who used to be his superior, because it turned out that Colonel Ma was Suchin's former trusted subordinate when they were still both serving in the military.
大哥!
In an old hut, Colonel Ma began to tell about the condition of the martial arts world, which is in great turmoil. Fighters from Western countries have slaughtered many Chinese warriors in brutal matches in the arena. Tomorrow afternoon, he plans to go directly to the arena as one of the participants to prove the greatness of Chinese martial arts before the world.
正在拿我们中国武夫的命开玩笑。
Colonel Ma actually only hoped that Suchin would stop drinking so that he could take good care of his son. But instead, Suchin left Feng to Colonel Ma because he felt he was no longer fit to take care of and raise a child.
为了孩子。
Unable to leave his father alone, Feng apologized to Colonel Ma for not being able to come with him. Feng chose to return to the hut and decided to keep his father company no matter what. The next morning, Suchan woke up and found a letter written by Feng, which contained the sincerity of the son who actually wanted to turn things around by taking care of his father. It was in that state of consciousness that Sushan felt touched and then decided to watch Colonel Ma's match according to Feng's request. Taking place in an arena organized by Westerners, Colonel Ma looked very happy to see the presence of Sushan, who came to watch him. Despite being chased away due to an unpleasant odor, the guards finally let him in after Colonel Ma gave him a more appropriate and respectable robe and hat. While Colonel Ma was getting ready, a Western fighter had just killed one of the Chinese martial arts masters without following the rules. At the same time, Suchin seizes the moment to enjoy the free alcohol provided while watching Colonel Ma about to fight in the arena. Now it was time for Colonel Ma to face off against a big fighter who at first glance looked impossible to beat. And armed with the wushu basics he had learned over the years, Colonel Ma forged ahead with confidence. But Colonel Ma was beaten to a pulp with ease by the Western fighter. Seeing his father's best friend about to be killed, Feng immediately ran into the arena to try to prevent it, and while Feng was in pain, that's when Suchin appeared in the arena to come to the rescue. And yes, with just one punch to the side of his head, the Western fighter fell on the spot. Just as Suchin was about to leave the arena, another fighter suddenly appeared to block him and did not allow him to leave the arena. Suchin was finally confronted by two fighters who had huge bodies, but thanks to the drunken god move that Suchin had just mastered, he managed to defeat both of them with his unique technique and came out victorious. Seeing the incident as a great entertainment, the organizers immediately mobilized all the Western fighters they had. Although Sushan was formidable in battle, he began to feel the fatigue when he was continuously ganged up on without stopping. Even though Sushan's body had begun to be battered, he was still able to get up and continue the fight. Realizing that the opponent this time was very tough, a committee also injected special painkillers into one of his flagship fighters, and of course, the more severe the challenge now faced by Suchin. With the last remaining strength, Suchin saw Feng's crying face while begging for the match to be stopped, and not wanting to disappoint his beloved son again. Suchin also exerted all the remaining energy, and finally managed to subdue the fighter until the fight was officially closed.